Jack here, owner of Hockey Alley, bringing you back hockey history. Today's guest is Bill Gardner, NHL player from the Chicago Blackhawks. How are you doing, Bill?
I'm excellent, Jack. I got up this morning and it was beautiful. It was a little sunshine, which we haven't had a lot of here. And I'm in Wisconsin now. I moved recently from Chicagoland. My wife and I moved to a lake, and I'm looking out at the lake, and it's beautiful. It's frozen, and I feel like I should get my skates on and go for a wee skate.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Here we have had some rain. Yeah.
No kidding. Wow.
A lot of rain.
Crazy,
A lot of rain.
Yeah. It's terrible.
Terrible. Yeah. How many years did you play in the NHL?
If you look at my stats, it says in 9 years. So I played in 9 years. I didn't fully play in all of those 9 years. I had a good spell from 80, 81 to 86, 87, I believe it was. And then the next couple of years, I was in the minors more than I was in the National Hockey League. But, yeah, it was a good little run and lots of fun and some pretty good teams back in the day in Chicago. But we had to face that Edmonton Oilers team in the early 80s quite a bit.
Oh, yeah. They were awesome. And
yeah,
Chicago was awesome, too. You guys had some great players on that team, too.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And where did you play your juniors?
Well, I grew up in Toronto, and I played all the way through Toronto and was really fortunate to play in some excellent teams as a kid and really good coaching. And I said this often, too, about coaches today. So many parents are involved in coaching, and coaches have their sons on teams. And I was lucky back in that time. I never played for a team that had a coach that had a son on it, which is phenomenal today. I mean, you wouldn't see that. So these people were all volunteers, and they were really good coaches. So I grew up in Toronto and played all the way through minor hockey in Toronto, and got drafted by the Peterborough Petes in the Ontario Junior Hockey League, and I played there for 3 years. Then I was drafted to the Blackhawks. But those 3 years in Peterborough were the best 3 years of my life. It was phenomenal there. We had Gary Green as a coach for 2 years, and then Mike Keenan my last year. And those 3 years, something that doesn't happen very often to junior players, but we went to the Memorial Cup all 3 years. So we won our OHL championships, and we won one Memorial Cup out of the three, lost in the finals twice. So pretty nice. We were very lucky and fortunate.
That's very rare, by the way, to go three consecutive years to Memorial Cups. Is harder to win it than the Stanley Cup.
Absolutely, and that is the case because you only have a certain amount of time to win. And today, some players, might play 1 or 2 years maximum because they're so good now. And back in my draft year was the first year they brought the underage draft back. So, some guys like a Larry Murphy that we had for a couple of years that played in LA and played a number of teams, a Hall of Famer. He only played 2 years. So, but anyway, it was great.
Yeah, and you played with Wayne Gretzky also. Wayne Gretzky was in the league or on your team.
It's funny. I was just talking to Greg Taberge. I'm not sure if you know that name. His grandfather was Dick Clapper back at the Boston Bruins way back. But Greg was he was the best defenseman in the OHL 1 year and played for Peterborough. Was drafted by Washington and played a little bit in Washington. But anyway, we were just talking about Gretzky. It's funny, and he showed me Wayne played in Peterborough for 3 games as we were 15. And I actually played in one of those games also. I said to Greg, I played one of those games too with Wayne. We played for the Seneca Nats, and Peterborough was shorthanded, I guess. And Wayne got called up, and I got called up. So we played a little major junior A at a very young age. So it was pretty neat. But yeah, Wayne and I played together in Seneca Nats. That's what they were called, but it was a Toronto team. Played in the Metro Junior B Toronto League, and we were a team that maybe had. I mean, you could play to your 2021, and our goaltender was 21, and he had a child, believe it or not. And then everybody else was probably 15 to 16.
Wow.
Which was very, again, unordinary because a lot of junior B teams, they stock up in older guys, and it's a big area kind of team where you might be in a smaller town, but people pack the place on a Friday and a Saturday to come watch. But they did with us too. And another member of our team didn't play a lot, but just a great guy, and he's done really marvelous stuff in his life. Is Murray Howe, Gordie Howe's youngest son. played with us also on that team, and he was
Wow.
about 15 or 16 too. So we saw Gordy a couple times. He came up and came in the dressing room and talked with us all. It was so cool back then. But Wayne was outstanding. I kind of knew Wayne because of everything that the accolades that he had as a kid growing up, and Brantford, not very far from Toronto, and I knew all about him. And fortunately, we got to play together. We had the same agent, so Wayne came over, a bunch of times to my house, and it was a lot of fun. I think we went bowling once, and we played street hockey,
Wow.
all the great things.
That's awesome. Wow.
He was a special player.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's awesome. How was it to play in Chicago with the fans there at the stadium?
Yeah, honestly, it's. I don't think another rink can ever compare. It was so unique, and the crowd, the place just it virtually rocked. I mean, it was moving, the beauty of the stadium was the opposing teams, and it had to be intimidating, but opposing teams loved to come too because of the field. The atmosphere was just outstanding. And I'm not sure if a lot of people don't know a lot about the stadium, but we had to walk up about 18 stairs to get to the ice level. So Tony Esposito, who was such a dominant goaltender for so many years, and my favorite, he had to walk up those stairs every game with those pads on, and those pads were stiff as a board back in those days, and everybody followed them. So just a raucous place. And when I first started with the Blackhawks, it wasn't sold out. Dennis Savard obviously was just a spectacular player, and the way he played the game, he attracted the crowd, and we ended up filling that place every night. So it was pretty cool.
Yeah, and Dennis Savard, he was an amazing stick handler, skater. What was it like to have him on your team?
The one thing about Dennis, I was lucky to play with him for a little bit too, and you had a tendency to watch him instead of playing the game. You'd be on the ice and you'd see some of the things he would do, and you think, "Wow, look at this guy! Oh, I'm on the ice too." But he was just spectacular in his ability to hold on to the puck and do moves at the same time. And we used to, as a kid, when I grew up, Serge Savard from the Montreal Canadiens did a spinorama move, and it was kind of slow back then, but it worked. And then Dennis Savard, he would do that at full tilt and keep control of the puck and make plays. And he was just an unbelievable skater for that time. I mean, there's so many great skaters today, the Connor McDavids, et cetera, but he just had a different gear altogether. I'm not sure how he did it, but it was beautiful to watch.
Were you there when he went through all 5 Oilers? The top.
Yes, I was.
Wow.
I was. Yeah,
that was an amazing goal.
Yeah. I actually, one year, my best year, I ended up playing quite a bit with him and Steve Larmer. And Steve Larmer is a good friend, and he is from Peterborough and played in Peterborough my first year and his first year at Major Junior A. And Larms was such a compliment the way he played the game. And their left winger normally for a number of years was Al Secord. And Al was a 50-goal scorer and a 250 penalty minute guy. So not many players fooled around with him, and it gave those two the luxury of some extra space. But my year that I ended up playing with him, I was very lucky in a sense that the Blackhawks themselves lost Al Secord as a left winger. They lost Kurt Fraser, and they lost Daryl Sutter with injuries. And Orville Tessier was the head coach, and he wasn't a fan of mine because I was a year after him, and his young guys had won the American Hockey League with Moncton. So I was the last guy that they tried on left wing with Dennis, and I ended up playing with him for 20-plus games and ended up with 27 goals.
Wow.
It was my greatest year and accomplishment. And Dennis, he never forgets it. When I see him, I golf with him in September, and Dennis, first thing he says always, 27 goals.
Does it change your game playing with those guys? Like a top, people don't get that chance sometimes.
No. No, it was definitely it was something. It was the experience itself. But let me tell you, as a youngster, I started playing the game at 5 and 6, and when I left Seneca Nats with Wayne Gretzky, I was a defenseman that entire time. So from 5 to 6 to 16, I played defense. And when I went to junior A, Gary Green he brought me in. He said, I think you can play in the National Hockey League, but I think you need to be a forward. And I thought, wow, the one thing about defense back in those days, you played all the time because they usually only had 4 defensemen. And then the forwards, you only had 3 lines or 4 lines. You didn't get as much ice time. So I ended up playing left wing to start off. And, I was in no man's land because I was a rushing defenseman. I got points. I played, the coffee-esque work, of that era. That's how I played the game. And I was going up and down the left wing, stopping and starting, not involved. And after about a month, Gary says, I'm going to try at center. And center was totally different. It was more of everything involved. You're all over the ice, you're supporting, you're making plays, and that's where I ended up. So the long story of it all is when I had to play with Dennis Savard, I had to go more up and down too. But he actually said to me, he says, Garty, I don't want you just to go up and down like that. I want you to move. I want you to come across so we can, make plays and have some flow. So it was kind of unique to have that instead of just going up and down and stop and starting, going to the net. He wanted it done differently. He wanted to have some fun and play. So it was terrific.
That's awesome. I want to ask you this. A lot of fans don't know and what it takes to make it to the NHL. How did you get so good to get there? Because not everybody makes it.
No, that is for sure. And I kind of mentioned I was very lucky to play on some great teams with some great coaches. And that certainly is a big part of it. When I grew up in Toronto land, I lived in Scarborough, and I lived 8 homes from our schoolyard. And the parents were so dedicated. We had 3 ice surfaces every year.
Wow.
So this is the 60s and into the 70s. And those surfaces, to me, if I recall correctly, it was end of November all the way to March break. So we had ice for, a good 4 months, and they had lighting too. And the lights went off at 11 o'clock.
Wow.
And the parents around the area, there was a hut that had a heater in it, and the parents would rotate, and they'd get that key for a week. And that week would give you the shovels, the hut, and then access to the school, and they'd bring a huge hose out every night after 11. So you'd shovel the rink and then flood it. And if you got the key that week, you got lucky because you got to sit in the hut there and warm up your feet a little bit once in a while. But anyway, that's what I did. I mean, I was 8 houses away, and after school, you get your work done, and I would be at that rink every night.
Wow.
And every weekend, if I wasn't practicing or playing with the team. And I've said this often, I was lucky to have some amazing people coach me and really help me learn the game. But the best coach I ever had was myself, because I would have to go up there and I'd have to compete against older players to play in games. They always had games. You throw a couple of boots on for posts, and they throw the sticks in or just pick teams. And I was the smallest and youngest. And if I didn't compete, I would never get picked. They wouldn't let me play. So you just push yourself. You want to play. You want to be able to, be a guy on the ice. So I've always said the best coach, honestly, was myself, because I had to push myself to be a better player, to be able to compete with older players. My neighbors, I got into the game of hockey because my next door neighbors on both sides were 2 years older than me, but they both played the game. And on Saturdays when the house league started for them, I would go with them to watch them play. Never played still. I was only 4 years old, but their parents would take me along, and I'd watch them. And then when it was time that I could join, I did. And, the rest is kind of history. So my parents were Scottish. They came over on the boat, when they were 18 and didn't know a lot about hockey, quite honestly. So I got lucky that I had neighbors that played the game.
That's so awesome. You were telling me a story about the kids playing street hockey, and this NHL player was playing with them and they didn't know it. You were telling me that earlier.
Yeah, it's a good little story. I work with the Chicago Wolves. This is my 21st year in the American Hockey League doing television. We've, over the years, there was, about half of that's been every game we televised, and nationally here in Chicagoland on a big station. So it's been really cool over the years seeing so many great individuals come through and play in the National Hockey League. But this young guy, Alex Green, is a local guy. He was with the Montreal Canadiens organization. They traded for him about a month ago, and he came in. He's from Lincoln Park, a really nice suburb of Chicago, right kind of downtown area. And I was talking with them, and then I went on and, trying to get some information on him, and I found this podcast, and he was talking about how he got started in hockey, similar to what I just was saying. And he lived in a neighborhood, and there was kids playing street hockey, and he'd watch them and see them and not participate. And then once he saw this older gentleman out there playing, and he said, I'm going to go out and start playing. He did that, and then a couple of days went by, and the guy ended up being his next-door neighbor who kept going out and playing with him, and his next-door neighbor ended up being Bob Probert. So pretty unique. Alex Green is his name, and he, again, from Lincoln Park, and that's how he got involved. Bob Probert was out playing street hockey, his next-door neighbor, with a bunch of kids, and everyone knew who Bob Probert was, and he played in the NHL for the Blackhawks, so everybody wanted to be a Blackhawk. It was pretty neat.
It's awesome.
Yeah.
If the players of the 70s and 80s and 90s had the gear of the players today, how much better do you think the hockey would have been?
That's a great question, but it's a tough question, because I would think if you lived and played in the 50s and 60s, you'd be saying the same thing about our era when it was the 80s. And that's just evolution. It's just the way things work and develop. But I will say this, and again, I've been in the American Hockey League now for over 20 years, and I watch today's kids, and some of them are not kids. They make a great living in the American Hockey League now, a lot of them. And I've always said these players of today in the AHL are as good as my era of the NHL. That is the quality and the depth of hockey. I mean, because now they're from everywhere, not just the United States, everywhere, but they're from all over the world, and everybody wants to play in the NHL. So they're so good. There's such a fine line to be able to make a team, and you hopefully have a team that really needs you in your position to get a shot today, because they're so good. It's phenomenal. But the skates are different, the sticks are different. But the bottom line is you play with your heart, and if you don't have that, you're probably never going to play.
That's true. My channel's a lot about hockey sticks, bringing back hockey history with sticks. What kind of sticks did you use? What were your favorite?
Well, it's funny. We just moved here, so I'm still kind of revamping my area with all my kind of paraphernalia. And I have a lot of sticks. Through the years, I have a Wayne Gretzky stick, and I'll tell you this story too, but I have a Wayne Gretzky stick, signed, and Mark Messier. I got some great Gordie Howe, some really neat sticks. But I always wanted to have a stick almost from every company with my name and number stamped on it.
Oh, wow.
Like back in the day. And I really do. I mean, I have, from CCM to Victoria, Victoriaville, Coho, Canadian was the stick I used most of the time. Titan. Now, Titan we had to use in Peterborough as a junior because that's all they supplied. So I used them for a couple of years professionally, and they're always a heavier stick. And I went to Canadian because they were a lot lighter. But I sure would. I have one of pretty much every stick that was developed and used with my name on it, which I kind of like. So.
Oh, that's awesome. Wow, that's awesome.
I would say overall Canadian was the stick that I kind of used the most.
I love that one. The 6001, I used that for like 12 years.
Sure, absolutely.
Yeah. You know what I like the most is they didn't change sticks every year like they do now. They kept the same thing, Sherwood 5030. And, and people got used to it because it's hard to get used to new stuff all the time. That was a problem.
Very true. And, the one thing also with sticks, and I used Canadian all the way through, and I went to Europe and played for 4 years at the end of my career, and I still use Canadian. But the one thing I did, I'd always try to give, I had kind of a unique blade, and they could never get it the way I really wanted. And I was actually asked this question just the other day in one of our broadcasts. So I'll tell you the story. I'd get my stick, and obviously you'd go through a dozen, and they were not the same. Every stick had a little difference to it.
Yeah.
Some were lighter, some were whippier, and you'd always ask for stiff in my case, and the curve I wanted, and the blade I wanted. But I would take those sticks, and I'd pick the ones I really liked, and I would take the blowtorch, and I would completely straighten the blade.
Oh.
And then throw it in ice. And then when they were cooled off and dried off, I would take the stick and curve it exactly how I wanted it.
Wow.
So I did that my entire career using the Canadian.
This is the first guy I've heard that do that ever.
Isn't that funny? I just felt like it wasn't the way I wanted, so I would straighten it right to a T.
Wow.
And make sure it was cooled off, because if you started the blowtorch, it would bubble and, the wrap stuff, and you had to make sure it was completely dry to redo it. But
Wow.
and I snapped a couple,
Uh-huh.
obviously. I played in Europe, so I love the bigger curve at the end of my blade. So I had to be careful with the tip.
Yeah.
Yeah, unique.
That's awesome. Did you get to keep any of your jerseys over the years?
I did, and that's one of the things I'm going through right now. I've got I played in Hartford and I played with the Blackhawks. I have a home and away for both. They're on the walls right now. The Peterborough Petes, when I were lucky enough to win the Memorial Cup as a team, they gave us our sweater, so it's up on the wall. But I have a number of sweaters, whether it's the Moncton Hawks, my first year pro, all the way to playing with Gretzky. I have that sweater. But my most unique is my first 2 years, actually, and they're so small and they're made of like almost a wool. I have them too, and I have to thank my parents who kept all this stuff for some reason. But I actually have so many. I've got my European sweaters, which are so unique with the advertising and the colors. So I just don't have enough walls to put them all up. But I do have those sticks. And I was talking about sticks too. That I played in the World Juniors in 1980. We went to Helsinki, Finland, and I got so many European sticks, that aren't brand names. They're from, Finland or Sweden or Russia, and they're so different. Terrible sticks, but I have them, and they're kind of cool to have too.
Yeah, definitely. Were you there when you guys had the brawl with Minnesota in '83?
Oh yeah.
So I want to.
I was the guy sitting in the third row, probably though. I was a lover, not a fighter. That was something with Minnesota. We had some heated rivalries back in those days with St. Louis and Minnesota, but there was none like Minnesota. It was just squirrely all the time. It was interesting games.
Yeah, did you? That if people don't know, go on YouTube. They could see it. It went for like a half an hour, something like that. It was going on. I mean, you can't see the whole thing maybe, but it was just a bits and pieces. But did that carry off the ice at all after the game or no?
It's funny, and it did go for a long time. It went from, one corner of one rink, it went to the benches, and went down to the other end of the ice. It was just unbelievable. But it's kind of funny because when you play teams so much, you kind of get to know individuals. And back in those days, too, there used to be a slow pitch baseball tournament in June in Niagara Falls, and all the teams would participate. So you got to meet guys. When you're on the ice, it was certainly heated and hated and all that kind of stuff. But, I knew a lot of those guys. I played with some of those guys, and like a Tom McCarthy that just recently passed away. But he was such a great player. And Keith Acton played. Some of the guys, Dino Cicerelli, I played with a little bit in the World Juniors. So, these guys, but it's just a different thing when the game's going on. And, fortunately, most of it started with the tough guys, the guys that, did the fighting. They were in amongst the guys that fought. So it wasn't as if you, as maybe like myself, a smaller guy, you didn't have to fight a Willie Plett, someone huge. And that just didn't happen. So, but they were unique, and the fans loved them. That's for sure.
That's awesome. Awesome. It doesn't happen anymore. That stuff doesn't happen anymore.
Well, today you can't even touch anybody. I think the game's gone. It's not hockey. Hockey's a physical game, and it's unbelievable. I get so irritated every game. I'm calling games. I'm watching these calls, and I shake my head. What happened to this game? This is like protecting the quarterback all over the ice.
Yeah, unfortunately, I don't watch either. I went to one game 3 years ago was the last time I went, and it was hardly any hitting. I saw 2 body checks the whole game. Yeah.
It's just in the sticks. You can't touch anybody. You get called for hooking, slashing, and guys drop their sticks now. So then you automatically get a slashing penalty. It's weird.
I think what it is, what I'm thinking is, in 2004 when everybody used a one-piece stick, it's getting too expensive the way they used to play. So they had to do something to change it. It's all about money, I think, with equipment changing, and they had to modify the game because it's too much. Otherwise teams would be out of bankrupt. These things break.
Well, I don't know how they survive now, but it's interesting that the cost of franchises, we're talking billions of dollars now. So
Yeah.
it is unbelievable.
Yeah. One more thing I wanted to ask. If you were commissioner of the NHL, what rules would you add or change?
Well, there's a lot of things, and we're just talking about a couple of them. I just don't like, they always wanted to speed the game up. They wanted less whistles. They wanted more flow. And then all of a sudden you have all these altercations that happen with a slash or a hook and, hits from behind. Guys know where guys are on their backs, so they get nudged and they fall into the boards and they draw penalties. I mean, all that, there's certainly a situation where you can have a case for individuals with concussions and injuries, and you don't want that to happen. But that fine line is being crossed, I think, by many a player drawing penalties now. And the old Billy Barber dive, we used to call it back in the day when he was with Philadelphia. But guys drop penalties more now just because they know what's going on. They can feel stick on their hand, so they drop their hand off the stick, and give a flinch. And all that stuff happens. So I wish that would change. But more importantly, I think a couple of areas, and this I talk about this a lot when I'm doing broadcasts. One is, and I don't understand why this has not been a rule. In the defensive zone, you are allowed to so-called make a hand pass. You can give a puck to a teammate after it touches your hand. After it leaves the zone, that cannot occur. I don't know why, again, for flow and speed of the game, why in the offensive zone can you not make a pass with your hand?
Yeah.
Just to knock it down. And most of those plays are not hand passes, which in the rule books is a hand pass. It's just knocking the puck down, and maybe your teammate will pick it up and they'll blow it automatically. Now, why in the defensive zone are you allowed to do that, and you cannot do it in the offensive zone? It makes no sense.
No sense at all.
That's a rule that doesn't make. Yeah, I mean, it's only for a third of the ice you can do it in. It's the weirdest thing. And again, so you don't need to stop the play. Let it continue. You want flow, and you want goals. I mean, that's what they wanted. They wanted more offense. So why not do that? You can't throw a puck in the net. You can't knock it into the net with your glove. But offensively, why can you not tap it to a teammate if it's in the air and let him continue on? I just don't understand why that has never been looked at, or maybe it has. They haven't voted on it. And the other one that I'm pretty stringent on this too is goaltenders. Again, the flow, and they want goaltenders to put in those funny lines so they can't go in there, but goaltenders find ways to move the puck. If you don't want them to move the puck, let them be able to be hit. If a goaltender wants to come way out of his net and play a puck, a player should be able to hit him.
Fair game.
Another player, yes. If they don't want to get hit, then they'll stay in their crease.
Yeah.
And they won't play the puck. But if he comes out and becomes a part of the game and wants to stick handle as they do today and fire it up the ice, you should be able to hit him and not have a brawl. And if, in my eyes, if that happens where a goaltender comes out and makes a play and a player hits him and then a teammate of the goalie comes in and starts a fight, he should be automatically tossed out of the game. Automatically.
Have you seen the goalie check the guy too? I've seen that.
Sure.
Then
they're
nobody
allowed to do that too, yeah.
Yeah.
Again, it's about the flow of the game, and they don't want goalies to play it as much because they put in these areas of the ice where goalies cannot go into. But to stop it, let them be a player. They are a player. Why can they not be hit? If they want to play the puck, they should be able to be hit.
Yes. I think that's fair game.
Yeah.
Yeah. Bill, I want to thank you so much for coming on and talking hockey history with me. It's awesome. It was a great interview.
You're very welcome. And, I was very fortunate to. The one guy that we didn't I briefly mentioned was Tony Esposito.
Oh.
Now, I was a kid in Toronto. I'll just tell you quickly. I was a kid in Toronto. My bedroom was Blackhawk paraphernalia head to toe. Pictures, pennants, posters, all Blackhawks, every player. But my favorite player, believe it or not, even though I never played the position, was Tony Esposito. And I think he was the best. In 72, the Summit Series with Russia, he was phenomenal. He was the best goalie in that series. Anyway, I got to sit beside him for 4 years in the Chicago Stadium.
Wow.
We had a great friendship, and I miss him dearly. But the last thing I wanted when we were playing, and I knew he was hanging it up, I asked him, because Tony was very different because he caught with the opposite hand that most goaltenders do. I said, Tony, as a kid, I loved you. I played street hockey as a goalie. I loved being Tony Esposito. Can I have your gloves? Can you sign them? And he did. So I
Wow.
have his gloves, and I have a stick, and I have many pictures
How cool.
of Tony.
Huh.
So that is one of my prized possessions. Was having goalie gloves from Tony his last year.
That is awesome. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow,
So
that's
it's pretty unique
cool.
to be drafted by the Blackhawks and play
Yeah.
for the Blackhawks. And I'm from Toronto, but the Blackhawks were always my favorite team.
That's awesome. Wow. And played with great players, a lot of great Hall of
Absolutely.
Famers. Awesome.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. Thank you so much for all the stories. It's awesome to hear.
Thank you, Jack. It's a pleasure.
Thank you. Have a great day.
You too.
Take care. Take care.